Welcome to Meat Bone Express, the filmmaking and cinema podcast. Today we have Thomas Frank, who is the author of Listen Liberal, a book that has become a sort of huge international success, particularly through internet media sources. Thomas, welcome to the program.
Hey, it's great to be here.
The first thing I want to ask you about is Hillary Clinton's campaign, a bit like Barack Obama, had great celebrity and Hollywood endorsement. Why didn't this work this time?
That never works, though. This is one of the continual, what would you call it? Fixed ideas of the Democratic Party that celebrities are really good for endorsements. I swear, I've been arguing with them about this for a long time. Well, they used to, I used to be able to argue with them. Now it doesn't matter anymore. But the idea that because celebrities are, we like to go to their movies. Everybody loves to go to movies, and everybody loves, Hollywood films or whatever. Therefore, that can transfer via the star to the Democratic politician. That doesn't work. When people actually deeply resent, it's strange. They'll go to Hollywood movies, they love Hollywood movies, but they deeply resent those people as individuals, celebrities. It's aristocracy, of course, right? It kind of makes sense, and the Democrats can't see this, and they just keep trying that again and again and again, and they're always astonished that doesn't help them out very much. All the celebrity endorsers. No, that's not how you win an election, it turns out.
Is this relevant to your thesis of liberal elites having taken over the Democratic Party? Is this part of the same logic? Is it part of the same bubble?
Well, yes, and yes, because this is going to just be completely and utterly shocking to you, but Hollywood stars are an elite. They're very, very wealthy, very beautiful. They live in these gorgeous mansions in Los Angeles, California, and they are an elite. And the Democrats can't seem to figure that out. That's not how you reach ordinary people. But the larger point that I make in Listen Liberal is that conservatives have talked about the liberal elite forever, but they never say what they mean by it. They never explain it. They never look into it. And I decided to actually do it. What does this mean? What does this phrase mean? Is it all bullshit? Am I allowed to say that, by the way?
Of course.
Is it all just bullshit? Is there something to it? Is there something real about it? And there is something real about it. And and it's hiding in plain sight. I mean, all I had to do was just the research was very simple. All you do is read Democratic Party, strategy documents and, articles that they write in their magazines where they talk about who their demographic groups are. And the number one, group that supports Democrats is the professional class. And by professional, I mean very affluent people with advanced degrees, doctors, lawyers, that sort of thing. But it's a very large category now. It's not just your traditional professions. It's all over the map. But whatever their occupation is, they are, it's a high status occupation that's based in educational achievement. So always highly educated, always very affluent, and that's their number one constituency. Okay, and that's also who all the leaders of the Democratic Party are always drawn from this group, and they have over the years developed all of these theories, these sort of half-assed pseudo-Marxist theories about how this group is going to triumph, historically the great dialectic of creativity and innovation. And so this is all out in the open, by the way. This is nothing secret about it. Like, remember that book, the Triumph of the Rise of the Creative Class? I'm sure it was huge here in Australia. I mean, it's huge everywhere. Everybody is into this stuff. Well, that's what I'm talking about. Democrats really buy that. They really agree with that stuff. So you look at it, the professionals are an elite. They're not the elite of society, but they're one of the elites. They're people whose privilege is enshrined in law. Like, you can't just walk into a courtroom and start pleading. You have to be a member of the bar. The privilege of the professions is a matter of law. It's how our society is structured. They are society's officer corps. The rest of us are all just enlisted men. And that's who the main constituency of the Democratic Party is. Now, the reason that's shocking and strange is because this is a party that has its brand identity is as the party of working class people, the party of the people. But in fact, they have abandoned that, group of voters for this other one. And that is the entire story and the entire problem. And if you want to understand why Hillary lost, seek no further.
So there's this relationship with Hollywood, but what about new media and the Democratic Party's relationship with Silicon Valley?
They love Silicon Valley. So one of the things that I sort of cataloged in Listen Liberal is the way that the Democrats have sort of they love certain industries and do these sort of amazing favors for certain industries. The one that was most noticeable that's come back to hurt them the worst is Wall Street. So when I was young, the Democrats were the party that hated Wall Street. If they got in, they'd crack down on the bankers and they'd regulate them in this way and that. Franklin Roosevelt broke up Wall Street banks and did all this stuff. And so they have this long history of being enemies of Wall Street. But then in the 1990s, when Hillary's husband, Bill Clinton, was president, they changed 180 degrees on this, and they became instead a party that was competing for Wall Street's affection, along with the Republicans. And in fact, they did arguably more favors for Wall Street than the Republicans did. When Bill Clinton got the big deregulation of Wall Street passed, it wasn't Reagan that did that. Reagan couldn't get it done, but Clinton did, and Clinton is a Democrat. And so the party had, in the 90s, completely reversed its stance in regards to this industry. And Silicon Valley is the same kind of thing. Democrats absolutely love this industry. All these, just think of Barack Obama and Mark Zuckerberg, all the times that he shared a stage with this guy, or Eric Schmidt. So I'm writing Listen Liberal, and it's a study of the Democratic Party, and this name Eric Schmidt just keeps popping up everywhere I go. And every time I'm like here, looking at pictures of Obama in the early days of his administration, and here he is standing next to Eric Schmidt. And I'm reading, here's Hillary Clinton giving a speech in The Hague, and she gives a shout out to Eric Schmidt, who's sitting there in the audience. And he keeps cropping up again and again and again. And by the way, if you read the Podesta emails that were on WikiLeaks, he's all over the place in the sort of councils of the Democratic Party. Eric Schmidt, this is the CEO of Google. He's very close to these guys. Now, I can understand. I know, they want to be. Eric Schmidt is an influential American, and they should have their views heard. He has a lot of lobbyists. He's a very powerful person. But if you're the party of the people, if you're the party of working people, you should seriously be considering not like, what can we do to be nice to Google? It's how can we make sure that Google doesn't take over the economy? This is scary what Google is doing, or what Amazon is doing, or what Facebook is doing, or what Uber is doing. Instead, the attitude that you get from these Democrats is this worshipful reverence towards these people.
So you're essentially saying this is a deal with the devil?
Well, yeah, but that implies that you get something from it. They just lost. They made this deal and they lost. Where's the payoff,
When you have Facebook and Google on your side, how can you lose?
Well, we're learning the answer to that, how you can lose. And Uber, don't forget that. So the Democratic Convention, they struck a special deal with Uber to ferry delegates back and forth from their hotels to the convention center via Uber cars. And I don't ride in Uber. That's one of my things. I take a traditional taxi. And so one day I was taking the traditional taxi over to the convention, and I had an elderly friend with me, a journalist. And I'll be damned, we weren't allowed anywhere close to the arena, and we had to get out a mile away and walk. And this is in this incredible American heat. It's in Philadelphia, it's 100 degrees, and we're walking across black asphalt. And it's insane, and you're losing your mind. It's like crossing the Sahara, and at some point you walk into, there's a tent halfway across this vast parking lot, this vast sort of Sahara parking lot. And we walk into the tent, and the tent is air conditioned. It's the fucking Uber tent. That's where everybody else is getting dropped off. And they struck this special deal. Now, you know what Uber is? Uber exists to circumvent like wage and hour regulations in America. And that's the model. That's what they do. And you can call that innovation if you want, but that's ruination for working people, that model.
What is the perception of liberal Hollywood and the messages in Hollywood films in that central area of America, the heartland. What is the relationship? Is there a disconnect?
Obviously, people in America like to go to movies, right? Like people everywhere. And they like to watch TV, like people everywhere. But they also hate it at the same time. It is a love-hate thing. And the culture wars are really about this. I mean, this is when I was writing What's the Matter with Kansas. This came up again and again and again. And what I finally decided was that people, they like being entertained, but they hate the fact that they have no say in these movies and in the assumptions. If you watch a Hollywood movie, they make all sorts of cultural assumptions about what's right and what's wrong and who's good and who's bad. And movies, like entertainment has since time immemorial, deals in stereotypes. And these people see themselves on the receiving end of those stereotypes now. And that's not a secret. That's not a clever observation that I came up with. This is well known, and it pisses people off. And so they love watching TV, going to the movies, but they also fucking hate it. And so that's America. I mean, we're torn. We're torn, and we just elected think of the last. Well, okay, not George W. Bush, but Reagan and Trump are both, entertainers. They're known for that. Or someone like Rush Limbaugh or Glenn Beck. These are entertainers. That's what they do.
Does that compound things? It feels like a double whammy. You're taking away my way of life in regards to my work. The factory's not here anymore, and then you're telling me I'm an idiot.
Yes, and that is, by the way, that's the heart of all this stuff. I'm married to an economist, and one of the things that people will often quote orthodox economics to you on trade as a way of sort of dismissing or poo-pooing complaints about trade deals. But if you read orthodox economics on trade, they say, okay, when you have free trade, it's not going to be a winner for everybody in society. It's going to be good for some people and it's going to be bad for other people. And what you have to do if you're going to do these kind of deals, you have to find a way to support or redistribute to the people who've been harmed by the trade deal. Well, we don't do that in America. We scold those people, the losers from the trade deals. We tell them that they're dumb shits. And we yell at them for not understanding economics and not going to college and for having dropped out of high school or whatever and working in manufacturing. Like, what kind of idiot are you working in manufacturing? And we laugh at them. That's how we treat them. So we wreck their way of life and then we laugh at them. It's a lose-lose. It's a terrible way of treating people.
Why is Trump's rhetoric more protectionist than the so-called center-left more socialist party?
God, they aren't that's a word that doesn't apply in America. You know that, right? They are our left party in our two-party system, but they're not. They have trouble even with the idea of a welfare state. That is extremely controversial still in America. The word socialist they would never use to describe themselves. And in fact, this is one of the big problems they had with Bernie Sanders, is that he likes to use that word to describe himself. So free trade. Free trade means different things to different people. You might think it means zero tariff or low tariffs between countries so they can trade back and forth. Well, we have that. That's not really a big problem. What is a problem is when we negotiate trade deals with countries that are specifically designed to protect certain industries and certain classes of Americans and to expose other classes of Americans to devastating forces. The classic example is what's called NAFTA. I don't know if Australians know what it is. You know what it is? Okay, so it's a trade deal between Canada, Mexico, and the United States. And it's not a free trade deal. People will often refer to it as a free trade deal, but in fact, tariffs with Mexico were very low before NAFTA was signed. NAFTA is 2,000 pages long, remember. If you wanted free trade, you could write that in a paragraph. NAFTA is 2,000 pages long. What it does is it goes through, rule by rule, and it prohibits the Mexican government from expropriating or even taxing or even regulating American property in Mexico. And this is important to the American capitalist class because in the 30s, Mexico nationalized the oil industry, including a lot of American property. And the American sort of ruling class has never gotten over this. They're still pissed off about it. And so they took that power away from Mexico with NAFTA. And NAFTA made it possible to move a factory to just a few feet on the other side of the border with America, and then employ Mexican workers who are paid. You can pay very, very little. They don't have organized. They don't have independent unions there. It's a, it's a very corrupt system, labor-wise. And so you can make your products for 1/10 of the price or whatever, and then ship them right back, back into America. And that's what they did. And that's what the treaty was designed to allow American businesses to do, and that's what the treaty achieved. And so the American labor movement was like, no way, do not pass this deal. This is going to be terrible for us. It's going to ruin American manufacturing. And guess what? They did it anyway, and it did ruin American manufacturing, and it particularly ruined organized labor in America. Now, here's the punchline. The Republicans negotiated NAFTA, and they're lobbyists, they negotiated NAFTA, but they couldn't get it passed because the Democrats back in those days, is in the 90s, Democrats used to control Congress, and the Democrats in Congress were pretty left-wing. They were very pro-labor and that sort of thing. So Bill Clinton comes in, Democratic president, elected in 1992, and he gets that thing passed. He sets up a war room. He's got Rahm Emanuel at his side, and he runs a bulldozer over those labor guys in Congress, and he just smashes them, and he gets this thing passed. And so it has been, ever since then, a source of extreme bitterness for organized labor. This is the moment when their party put the knife in their back. And Clinton is a guy, they went out and worked their ass off to get him elected. Mm-hmm. And they gave him all this money, as they always do, and he betrayed them. This is huge. It looms very large in the working class mind, NAFTA, also because it comes up in every negotiation. If you go and negotiate, with any kind of contract negotiation, management will threaten to move to Mexico. And they won't just threaten the unions, they'll threaten the city. Like, I'm from Kansas City, so whoever that makes, garden hose or something like that is like, give us this, 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 and this, or we're going to Mexico. It happens all the time in America. So they've got a weapon that nobody else has. Anyhow, that weapon was given to them by Democrats. And working class people are extremely bitter about this to this day. And this election was one way of looking at it, and I think this is not an inaccurate way of looking at it. It's payback for that. And by the way, just a little PS here, Trump campaigned on this all the time, and Hillary was totally vulnerable on it because her name is Clinton. I mean, she said she's changed her mind on this. She's seen the light. She's come around. She's against NAFTA too. All this stuff. Nobody believed her. Nobody believed her. The PS I was going to say is that this is, for working class people, it's a source of incredible bitterness. For professional class people, it's a kind of guilty conscience. And I've talked about this for years. I mean, I've written about it. I think it's probably in every book I've ever written, NAFTA. And your sort of professional class people always dismiss this. They laugh at it. They've always said that, that means nothing. Everybody knows that that's not a big deal. These people are so stupid and protectionist, and they don't understand free trade, and they didn't study economics in college, and so they just don't get it. But the fact is, they understood it better than these professionals.
Do you think that the professionals, because they're much more comfortable in their positions, just have more of a theoretical understanding?
Yeah, but also it benefits them. I mean, it makes stuff cheaper. This is, so both all the trade deals and our immigration system in America is all designed to benefit one class of Americans and punish another class. Example, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which involved Australia. And we say, that's globalization, that's free trade, but it's not. This was negotiated by lobbyists, okay? It's not, if it was free trade, again, it would take a paragraph. That's not what it is. It's this extremely complicated agreement. Look at this bird. What is that? Do you know about birds?
I don't know the name of that bird.
Your birds are all foreign to me. I'm a bird watcher back home, and I don't know. I can't identify any of them. I
don't know if it's a piping shrike, maybe? I'm not sure.
Looks kind of like a shrike, doesn't it? Anyhow, so an example of this. So they negotiate, part of the deal is to protect copyright, to extend patent and copyright protections, and this exclusively protects two very important American industries, Big Pharma and Silicon Valley, probably also Hollywood too. And that is protectionist, but they're protecting very rich people. They're protecting the professional class. But workers, of course, get exposed to ruinous competition. So for them, it's a race to the bottom. But for Silicon Valley, this thing is
I want to ask you about Steve Bannon, because I think that's a good segue. I was reading a review you did of his film Generation Zero, which on one hand you were quite scathing of, but at the same time you could recognize, if you kind of zoomed out, there were some general truths. And in some ways the thesis of that film is very similar to Adam Curtis's work, as in they both seem to pinpoint the 1960s as sort of being problematic.
Yes. Okay, but let's take a step back. So Steve Bannon, this is the puppet master behind Trump. He's the genius, right? He's the brains of the outfit. Well, sort of like Karl Rove was.
Well, the one thing I just want to say, because it was like what you were saying, that it's socialism for the rich, but it's capitalism for the poor.
Yeah, well, that's true. When they say things like that, and I don't remember if Bannon says something like that. He might. That is correct. That is what America is. If you are rich, there's these incredible protections. Jesus Christ. Oh, well, Bannon talks about this in Generation Zero. When the stock market would start to go down back in the 90s, the chairman of the Federal Reserve, Alan Greenspan, this avowed libertarian follower of Ayn Rand, would actually intervene to prop up the stock market. Now, who does that benefit? Think about it. Oh, the people at the very top. So Generation Zero is a documentary about the financial crisis. And the first 20 minutes or so of it look like a real documentary of the financial crisis. I wasn't thinking of Adam Curtis. I was thinking of, there's another one called Inside Job that was big in America. Very good documentary, straightforward documentary of the financial crisis, interviewing a lot of participants, people that were insiders and knew what was going on. And for about the first 20 minutes, Steve Bannon's documentary, and they came out at the same year, by the way, the same year. Bannon's documentary looks exactly like that one. He's interviewing a lot of people who are experts, a lot of this sort of stock footage of skyscrapers in Manhattan and this kind of thing. And then he takes the weirdest turn. He's talking about, he's showing Hank Paulson, who was the Secretary of the Treasury under Bush. Hank Paulson with his cell phone clamped to his ear, desperately trying to arrange a bailout. And then he goes from that, footage of that, to footage of the Black Panthers in the late 60s, at a protest somewhere. And it's like, huh? What the hell does that have to do with this? And it's weird, because everything about Generation Zero, the surface arguments, the financial crisis happened. Yes, it was really bad. Yes, it had a lot to do with mortgages. Yes, bankers are corrupt. Yes. And then it takes this crazy turn to the 1960s. And here's the... And so you're right. It's in my Guardian article. I demolish this and I take it apart. It's a complete red herring. It's a bullshit explanation for what went wrong. To blame, the bad values of the baby boomer generation for the housing bubble, is ridiculous. And he doesn't even try to prove it. Like, show me the hippie who bought the McMansion. Show me the hippie that was running, Citibank. That was signing off on these things. Show me the hippie that was lending the money. He never does that. He doesn't even try. He doesn't show any connection. But this is the funny thing. There is a connection, and he doesn't know it. And I don't know why he doesn't know it, but this is the story in Listen Liberal. This is when the Democratic Party gave up on working class people, was in the late 60s and early 70s. And they did it because they loved the counterculture so much. It's so weird. There's a famous book, it's forgotten now, but famous at the time, came out in 1971. The author's name, Fred Dutton was his name. He was a Democratic insider. He was an advisor to the Kennedys. He later became a lobbyist, I think, for like Saudi Arabia or something like that. But anyhow, at the time he was a big Democratic insider. He was a member of a commission that the Democrats had called the McGovern Commission. And the idea of this commission was, this is at the end of the 60s, they'd had all these riots in 68, and the Democrats had lost the presidency to Richard Nixon. And so the Democrats said, we need to take stock of who we are, and we need to change the party, change what we stand for, change who is our, who are members of the party, who we appeal to. And this commission was charged with doing that. And they decided to remove organized labor from their structural position in the Democratic Party. Okay, that's thing number one. Who were they going to turn to instead? The youth movement, the kids, the enlightened, countercultural youth. And this guy, Fred Dutton, I've written a lot about the counterculture. You don't know this, but in my earlier work, I used to write about youth culture and what went wrong in the 60s and what the 60s were about. This is a subject that I know a great deal about. And there were a whole lot of sort of establishment, middle-aged people who loved the counterculture. So in an earlier book, I wrote about how the advertising industry loved the counterculture. And they would look at this thing and they'd see enlightenment, a kind of transcendence, an awakening, They'd look at the musical Hair, for example. This is the age of fucking Aquarius, And this guy, Fred Dutton, was someone in that vein. And he looked at the counterculture and he could see nothing wrong. This was so obviously what Democrats needed to identify with and needed to embrace. All the smart kids, and by the way, when they meant the counterculture, they always meant the kids at the elite colleges. It's always that. It's not kids of that age listening to rock and roll who happen to work on the construction or on the production line at General Motors. No, that's not what he means. He means the kids at the fancy schools. Not even kids at like the community college or at the state U's. Always at the fancy schools. That's always what they were referring to. And they saw in these kids just like, this is the coming of the Great Awakening. And he was like, that's the Democratic Party. That's who we have to be. And those people are, of course, that's the professional class. And that's their leader, Bill Clinton, the leader of that generation, and his wife Hillary. These are the two great figures that come out of that culture of the 60s. These are the people that deregulated Wall Street. So there is a connection. It's just slightly more complicated than Steve Bannon seems to know.
Well, is the sort of cyber utopian thing kind of came out of it?
Oh, yes. Yeah. I mean, there's many angles to this, but yeah, Silicon Valley as an industry exists as it comes out of the counterculture. Steve Jobs. All that stuff. The counterculture has given us an industry that is redistributing the wealth of America in the most grotesque fashion, ruined the working class.
It's part of the problem. The left has problems with concepts of power. When you look at a lot of revolutions and things that have come out of social media and social networking, like Occupy Wall Street, but revolutions in Europe and the Middle East, they all seem very...
You mean like the Arab Spring?
Yeah, very ineffective in a sense that they once they find some kind of power or they become a large enough group that they don't know what to do with, they don't have a leadership structure.
Yeah, the glamour of revolt sort of overshadows, the practical side. And this is the great lost promise of Occupy, by the way. I mean, this is a movement that had this moment where people were listening and people were ready and people wanted to sign up, and there's nothing to sign up for. Where do I go to sign up? Who's the leader? What's the platform? What's the manifesto? It doesn't exist, and this is a tremendous lost opportunity.
Is it possible that what Trump has done, and I realize he didn't get a majority of the vote in the country, but is it possible that he's unified some of that outrage in the Occupy movement with the Tea Party?
Oh, it's possible. I wouldn't want to speculate about that, but I will say something that you can...
Even by people staying home and not voting?
Oh, yeah, that possibly. But there's... well, certainly the Bernie supporters, I was a Bernie supporter, and a lot of Bernie supporters really felt like they'd been treated shabbily by the Democratic Party and were not psyched about getting out there and working for Hillary. And maybe they went and voted for her, but they certainly didn't go out there and go door to door or do anything like that. They really felt like the Democratic Party treated them. I mean, look at who she chose for VP. She didn't even choose Bernie or one of Bernie's friends. She chose, someone from her own faction of the Democrat, another centrist. She didn't even give them the time of day. They got nothing. She did nothing to mobilize them. Trump, at least in his convention speech, the Republican Party, Trump gave a shout out to Sanders. Now,
he still does.
Yeah,
he still does.
Yeah.
He says, I like Bernie. He will say that.
Yeah.
His rhetorical skills are on another level.
So another thing that you can point to, and this is something you can nail down, statistically, are people that voted for Obama that went to Trump, or counties that went for Obama that went for Trump. And I mean shifted in from like a good sized majority for Obama to 80% for Trump, rural counties in particular. And that happened all over the country, and I know people that voted for Obama and then voted for Trump. It happens.
your piece about the Bannon film, which I agree it's not a good film, at least it was putting forward a narrative. The film, did believe in something. One sort of criticism of the left at the moment from who we've talked about, Adam Curtis, is that he sees the problem with the liberal left is they don't really believe in anything. Do you think that's a problem?
That's the problem with Hillary Clinton, yes. This was a campaign of utter complacency. She had, what was her economic program? I'll give you $100 if you know. No one knows. No one knows what it was. We know she was, for one thing, she wanted to shatter the glass ceiling. And that sounds great, right? And women should be, obviously, be permitted to hold the highest jobs in our society. Absolutely, I agree on that. But that also seemed really self-interested. I mean, it was her. So there's this union of the philosophy or of the reform impulse and the individual, but it also just looked selfish. And it was also it was professional class. Hillary, it's the Democrats. One of the big problems with them blowing off Listen Liberal, which they have done. They are not interested in it. I'm not on TV and radio in America very often.
But your previous books, you were.
Yeah, I was all the time. Yeah, but not this one.
Is it?
But one of the problems with this is that they don't even recognize how stupid they look. So here's Hillary, and it is like everything she's proposing is class-centric, is defined by class, a class worldview, professional class worldview. Like the idea of running as a resume candidate and talking about about what an expert you are on things. Come on. That's going to appeal to like lawyers and PhDs and people like me, but not to the broad public. Her idea of running a campaign of national unity with, we've got Republican experts, we've got generals over here, and at the Democratic convention, it was one Republican after another walking across the stage and telling us how great Hillary was. Yeah, that's not going to cut it for average people. Nothing that she was. I mean, the idea of saying America is already great, the system isn't rigged. To say something like that in a year when the country is exploding with rage is so deaf.
Was that arrogant?
It was. I wouldn't say it was arrogant. I'd say it was foolish. Because I think she really wanted to win. She would have done anything to win.
To what degree? Is there something unhealthy there? The staging of election night was, obviously under a glass ceiling, and it was all there were fireworks
Hillary.
ready to go.
It's you know what jinxing is? What's the word? Yeah, I don't know what you call it here, but there. When I'll tell you an awful story. So on election night, I was on ABC News, by the way. I was on your broadcast because I'm not on any American one. And before that, I was on an American TV show, but it was a very left-wing show that's not widely viewed. It's called Democracy Now! And I was on this show, and they were showing, before I came on, they were showing a clip of all of these voters in some town in New England putting their I voted sticker on the grave of Susan B. Anthony, who's a famous suffragette back in the day, fought for women's suffrage back in the day. And I saw that, and I'm like, that is such jinxing. That is like jinxing in 8 Ways to Sunday. It's like, never do something like that.
The general rhetoric of the angry white man what do you think of this rhetoric? It seems that we've kind of created a group that maybe that almost doesn't have the right to speak anymore, or at least that's the way they feel, and it makes them angrier, creates resentment.
Well, I've been writing about this for a long time, and I always thought that they were exaggerating. There's a whole sort of right-wing culture in America that wants to hear your grievance and that wants you to bring you into their sort of culture of grievance, where it's always about these things. But it's like the Bannon thing. It's all sort of true on the surface, but then you scratch the surface and it all falls to pieces. It's all bullshit. This is the Rush Limbaugh, Glenn Beck, right-wing sort of perma-culture that you have in America. And yeah, I've been writing about this for a long time, but this election, it's much beyond that. It's white women, too. And we often say the white working class did Trump in, but it's further than that. The black working class, who the Democrats always count on to show up at the polls and deliver the victory, always count on these guys. They didn't show up this time. They were not enthusiastic about Hillary. And they loved Barack Obama 8 years ago, but look, they haven't seen a whole lot of improvement in their lives since then. And This was across the board, the working class, and Democrats brush that off. They don't want to look that thing in the face. They don't want to acknowledge that it's true. And this is, we're all caught up in the politics of the moment now and Trump's latest idiocy, whatever it is. But this is going to go on. This is going to go on and on and on. It's not going to reverse by itself. It's not going to just change and go away like Democrats hope it does. This is going to continue.
I don't want to get you into trouble, but is there any part of you that's optimistic for the next 4 years? A movement towards
there is,
non-globalism and things like that. Is that not the silver lining?
Well, I don't know about that, because it's so what Trump was saying about the free trade agreements was true, but then again you scratch the surface and he doesn't know what he's talking about. He will tell you something about NAFTA that turns out to be completely wrong. Do you want an example? You don't need an example. Okay, I'll give you an example. So he was talking about how the trade agreements were really lousy. Hey, I agree with that. And then he says the reason they're lousy is because our government negotiators don't know how to negotiate, and that what we need to do is get a lot of businessmen in there and they'll negotiate a good trade deal. It's like, oh my God, that's who negotiated them. That's the source of the problem. He's completely misunderstood. So yeah, silver lining, but this guy, he said a lot of things that were good. Building up the infrastructure in America, yeah, man, that's a great idea. Do it. Get out there, blow $1 trillion, build new highways, fix our airports. Man, I'm all for that. He's going to screw it up somehow. There's another really interesting looking bird over there. The real silver lining for me is that the Democrats have been knocked back on their heels, and the Clinton faction just took a hell of a baseball bat upside the head back in November. And they still have not figured out what to do. And there is a very good chance that that the left wing of the party could come out on top. Now, there is not much of a left wing of the party left anymore. There used to be a very robust one. It was large. There's not much of that left, but it could happen. It could happen.
Ellison got
Perez
got the job,
yeah.
and it just seems so unshakable.
Yeah. The Clintons have the money, and they have the votes and the loyalty. Well, I mean, go back to the election for a second here. From hindsight, we can see that Hillary was the weakest candidate they could possibly have run. Had they run Biden, had they run Sanders, had they run O'Malley, had they run anyone, they probably would have beaten Trump, because Hillary was uniquely vulnerable on the trade issue in a way that none of these other people were. Biden, in particular, had a way of talking. He comes from this blue-collar background, and he has a way of talking to those voters. It wouldn't have been the disaster that overcame Hillary. Sanders, same deal. But Hillary, was uniquely vulnerable in that yet she got the nomination because the entire party came together around her and chose her as the successor to Barack Obama. Obama himself designated her as his hand-chosen successor. Every office holder in the party was behind her. I mean, Sanders had four or five people. She had 400. The entire party came together to ensure that it was her turn. Dynastic succession, by the way. This is the logic of. Yeah. This is not the logic of democracy. This is the logic of, royalism, and and that's the source of the complacency and all the other things that eventually brought her down. But that machine has not been disrupted. Okay. Yes, their leader, fell on her butt, but the machine itself is still working.
I actually want to ask you about RT, Russia Today.
I'm familiar with it. I've been on there before.
Yeah. I've seen you on one of the programs.
I was on Tom Hartman.
Yeah.
So he's a really good guy, by the way. He was a Hillary. I believe he was a Hillary supporter.
I think he was a Bernie supporter.
Well, at first, sure, but once Bernie was out, then I'm pretty sure he became a Hillary supporter. I mean, he had to. Right?
Well, how do you see RT's place in the media landscape? Because I feel like the most devious thing they're doing is actually doing a pretty decent job.
I would have never said that. I don't watch it. I'm only on that one show, and I'm very reluctant to do that anymore after all the revelations of the kind of stuff they've been doing. But I've only been on that one program, and other than that, I don't watch the network. Sorry.
Okay.
That's all I got.
Because it's just interesting because you have the Hartman program. You have some programs.
Well, he's a really good guy. Now he also does a radio show, and I knew him from his radio show. You mentioned Jimmy Dore. Tom Hartman is a very similar kind of person. I think he's wonderful. Really like him. That's my endorsement.
Well, what they're doing is, which I think is really quite devious, is giving jobs to some pretty decent people to run the programs how they want.
They have Larry King, don't they?
They have Larry King. They have Max Kaiser.
Yeah. Well, Larry King, not all that long ago. I mean, in the '90s he was like the one of the senior figures of American journalism, highly respected. So anyhow, but I don't, like I say, I don't watch any of the other programs. So.
I just want to ask about your journey with this book in regards to the media and what it's been like being a part of the alternative media.
But I used to write for the Wall Street Journal, so that makes it even more interesting. So when I started out in book publishing, you could not sell a book unless you did certain TV shows and certain radio shows. And I'm not going to go into that. I've been on those shows many times. And this book comes out, and I'm not invited anymore. And they're pretty blunt about it. It's like, no, we're not interested. Even after Trump got elected, and you can say, look, here's the book that called it, and you call them up, and they're like, nope, not interested. And these are people I had a personal relationship with some of them, a couple of years ago, back when I wrote for, when I used to criticize conservatism, and I still do criticize, as you have heard, but no, they're not interested anymore, and. That in itself is a story. I haven't written that story. Somebody has to write it. Why they're not interested? It's really, they are just not interested in that left critique of the Democratic Party.
The book seems more relevant now than even before.
Trump, But it is strange that it is getting out with alternative media, and this is all new. God, when What's the Matter with Kansas came out, I met the people who were starting YouTube. They came to one of my events. There's just got like 3 of them or something. It's in 2004, and now it's everywhere, and it is amazing what's going on. Now, do I write? I still write for The Guardian. That's pretty establishment. But yeah, it's weird to find yourself going from the Wall Street Journal to nothing, basically.
But how is it nothing though? Because the relevance of the newspaper is sort of
no, that's right.
waning.
That's right.
And
but by the way, that's the other part of the story. The New York Times is not. The obvious place to be saying the things I'm saying is the New York Times, and they are not interested. They do not want it. They've turned down. My publicist in America obviously has tried to get them to run excerpts from the book. Nope, not interested. We don't want it. Forget it. It's really strange. I used to write for them too. I've written for everybody, and I'm 50 years old. I've been around, but no, they're not. Nobody's interested anymore.
But the alternative media, or I don't even know if we should call it that, but the web media.
Yeah. So the Young Turks, by the way, is these guys, or about them?
Of course.
Yeah. So they're it's a very similar phenomenon. I was talking to one of them the other day, or the other month. And he said something really interesting. I don't know if I should quote him, but basically, let me just do this. I'll say they are doing a really interesting thing, which is they've realized that the mainstream media is circling the wagons, and there's this very limited range of opinion that's acceptable in the mainstream media. And what that has done is that's allowed this huge, broad area of material to cover and ideas to discuss that the mainstream media isn't dealing with. And, it's opportunity. If you're smart, that's opportunity out there. But they don't see it. The mainstream media doesn't see it that way. But like I say, I used to write for them, and I don't anymore, okay? Something is going on. They are, as these things are changing, they are shrinking the window of the acceptable.
And in terms of demographics, I don't know anyone that reads the Wall Street Journal, but I can tell you plenty of people that watch the Young Turks or listen to Jimmy Dore, and sort of check these things out. So I guess what I'm sort of asking is, does it even matter? If you're being embraced by this these other networks, I assume you're.
Does it matter?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, of course it does. The book, it is selling now, but it's been a year. It took a year to get this thing going, and My other books were bestseller. Come on, it's it's very different. It's very different this time around.
Is it a situation where?
By the way, when I started, everything was print. The internet didn't matter, so my magazine was a print magazine, the Baffler magazine.
People are still talking about your book. Is it a sustained thing it just
it has
keeps going?
been, yeah. Well, Trump, I thought it would cool off after the election, but Trump has made it all relevant again. So, and by the way, after I get done here, I'm going to Scandinavia. Yes, so I'm going directly from this beautiful, temperate city where the flowers are in bloom to winter in Norway. And then I'm going on a tour of the American industrial states that Trump won: Michigan, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Indiana, so on. So the paperback comes out in America when I get back. And yeah, it's constant. And I don't know when it's going to end now. I don't want to sound like I'm boasting, by the way. I'm not. This has been a humbling experience, this book. So, I mean, it's totally different than how the other ones have been received.
Well, this one's self-critical in a way, isn't it? It's you're having a look at your own side.
Yeah.
Yes. And are you?
Yeah, but that should be legit. That's nothing wrong with that.
Of course.
I mean, if you're an independent intellectual, we're supposed to answer to a higher cause. We're not partisan.
Are you finding, as I have found, that a lot of the left is becoming quite anti-intellectual, and in some ways political correctness is stopping all kinds of discussions?
Yes. Usually that accusation goes the other way, though. I wrote a book about anti-intellectualism years ago. It's called One Market Under God. And it was about how the free market people were against, we're anti-intellectual. And there's 100 ways to play that out. And it was kind of striking at the time. But yes, anti-intellectualism, the phrase gets thrown around a lot now, especially at Trump and Trump supporters. But yes, you see it on the left too, and not the left, you see it among the Democrats too, and the place that you see it is their utter blindness about class issues and their dismissal of them, refusal to talk about it or even countenance them, unless it can somehow come back to their favor, politically. But on trade deals, for example, I've been hitting this nail for 10 years. And you can't get the time of day from these people. They won't pay attention. They won't talk about it in a straightforward way. They will say or believe anything to distract from it. Now they talk about automation. They're all like, trade isn't important. It's all about automation. No, it's not. That's incorrect. But they all believe this.
Why is there such an obsession with identity politics when they can't touch class?
America. Class is thought to be a dirty issue, dirty word. It's supposed to be a classless society. People think it's very uncomfortable to talk about class, especially in the kind of we're talking about. You and I are talking about it in a very brute and unvarnished way right now. You could never do that in politics. You have to go about it in a much more circumspect manner. But there are still ways to do it. But it's also the guilty conscience of the Democrats that they aren't in touch with working class issues any longer. And that's, they're very reluctant to talk about it. And also, look, the identity politics in every other, that's a winner for them in every other respect, but not in this one. So you've got this weird situation, by the way, and this goes way back too, where the Democrats talk about race and gender and the Republicans talk about class. And it's upside down. Yeah, the world's turned upside down. This happens in our system every 100 years, where the parties will change position. And so the Democrats, when they were founded, were obviously the party of common people versus an aristocratic elite that was inherited from Britain, and that's how the Democrats started. And then eventually they became the party of slavery, and they were identified as slavery. And the Republicans came in and were, obviously for the downtrodden and this sort of thing. And Republicans remained the more progressive of the two parties for quite a while, and then they switched again in the 1890s, and then again in the 1930s. And it feels sometimes like we're going through another switch like that. Although Trump is an imperfect, to say the least, bearer of that change.
Bannon describes Trump as a blunt tool for Bannon's own ideology. Trump doesn't always speak with an auto cue. He says a lot of things that are not always accurate.
Yep.
And I'm just wondering, is that going to be sustained, or will the media adapt to his mode and look at this kind of bigger picture?
I don't know. I don't even know if the guy's going to last as president. He just seems so like he's like nothing we've ever seen before. And they used to say that it's a very hard job being president, and the president, it doesn't matter who they are, they adapt to the job and they learn how to do it. Wow, he's got a lot of learning to do. The other idea you hear around a lot in Washington is that Trump has basically outsourced everything to his vice president, Mike Pence. And that's the guy who's really in charge. I don't know what's going to happen. I mean, every day you wake up and he said something else outrageous. Like the thing this morning is, that Obama is wiretapping him when he was running for president. And it is outrageous, but then you stop and think about it, all those Snowden revelations a few years ago. It is, and the Democrats are saying, the president can't do something like that. It's like, I don't know. I mean, we didn't know what he was doing before that. That was very shocking. And then Trump's war with the CIA. I mean, Jesus Christ, it's crazy what is going on now. So who the hell knows?
Are there a lot of sort of Democratic voters that are kind of secretly happy with the results simply because they want the system to be smashed apart?
Well, okay. Sure, I mean, look, I'm one of those. I wanted the system to be shaken up, but I didn't want Trump to win. The thing is that, I have children and I'm a responsible member of society, and I like having Australia as our ally, for example. This guy doesn't know what he's doing. But yeah, I wanted the system to be shaken up, but I didn't want this. I voted for Hillary. It's easy to see that this guy is toxic, or it was easy to see. I mean, what the hell are we saying? He's only been in for a month. Anything could happen. He could be a success. Do you want to know how? It's easy. If he renegotiates a few trade deals, and he gets manufacturing growing again in America, which is not unthinkable, by the way, despite all of these Democrats laughing at the idea. It could easily happen. It could start happening tomorrow. And if he gets with his, if he does the infrastructure spending program, $1 trillion program, he'll get full employment. And if he gets full employment, wages will go up, and he'll get reelected. If wages go up, it'll be like, people will be like, awesome, finally, we're getting something too. And they will reelect him if he achieves that. That's what matters to average Americans.
Which, following the election, what you just laid out there seems to roughly be his stated goal.
Yeah. The big problem here is that the things that I just mentioned, I mean, I don't know if the Republican Congress will go along with them. The Republican Party, by and large, are still free traders. He's the only one that isn't. They don't believe in deficit spending. He's the only one that does. On those issues, he's more like a Democrat, like an old school Democrat, like 1950s or 60s Democrat.
I see the Democrats as socially liberal, but really quite sort of a capitalist, right? And they can sort of bring together a coalition.
Yeah.
He seems to have gone underneath.
Yeah, he's doing what I was saying they were going to do. If you go back and look at what's the matter with Kansas, that was clearly the direction that they were heading in. And the idea of what's the matter with Kansas was to warn Democrats. One of the ideas was to warn them about what was coming. And by the way, do you know what the response? You wouldn't know because you're not in America, but you can look this up. So at first, the Democrats were very interested in what I was talking about, and the book was, a success, and a lot of people read it and a lot of people commented on it. And then after about a year, the political science profession came together and announced that what I had described was not really happening. That the white working class was still very loyal Democrats, and you didn't need to worry about them leaving the Democratic Party and voting for Republicans, and this was a complete fantasy. And the Democrats bought that. They accepted that. Well, it's very comforting. They haven't done anything wrong, nothing to worry about. Look where we are. And I've been saying this for a long time. Exactly what you just said. That's what they're going to do. Look at what they're doing. That's what they're going to do. And it was easy to see coming. I mean, I didn't think Trump would win, but everything else about it was easy to see.
How much of it was surgical and picking the right states and
yeah, he turned out to be good at that. He turned out to be very smart about that. Trump is interesting because he seems like oh my Lord, what is that? Is that a swan?
Yes, a swan, yeah.
It's black. We don't have those in America.
Oh.
So Trump seems like an imbecile when you listen to his public statements, but he has to have some smarts to have figured that out, to go after first the trade issue, which would, like as I said, only works against Hillary, not against, had the Democrats chosen anyone else, it wouldn't have worked. And to do it, and then to hit those industrial states and just keep hitting them, right up until the last moment. He played it really well. He played it like a pro, which is funny because he's a complete novice. I mean, the whole thing is weird when you think about it. He was able to defeat the world's most, well-oiled political machine.
Is it just the cliches of it's refreshing? He's being human. He's speaking off the cuff, and which is something that's very hard to kind of calculate in maybe polling or a pathway to victory, but it's kind of worked for him. He's been relentless.
Yeah.
And the relentless
Well, a lot of people speak
confidence.
off the cuff and they say really stupid things that don't mean anything. It's also what he was saying. I mean, the manner of his speech was important because he seemed so vulgar and crude and unvarnished, but it's also what he was saying. Yeah, that is very important. Absolutely. They called him the blue-collar billionaire at the Republican convention.
I watched an interview with a guy called Sir James Goldsmith, who was a ruthless capitalist, really.
Isn't he from the Thatcher era?
Yeah, I watched him debate someone who was part of the Clinton administration. This is in the 90s, just when they were putting in, I think, just put in NAFTA and GARP was coming in.
Okay.
And he was saying, look, I'm a venture capitalist, I'm a corporate raider.
Yeah.
But
I remember this guy now. Yeah.
But what you are about to do is going to disrupt large sections of your population and cause social unrest and because it's illogical that manufacturing would stay here when it can go somewhere where the labor costs are so low. And this Clinton person from the administration said, no, it's not going to happen. And
they all said that. They were completely wrong. I mean, you can't say they were lying because these are predictions, but many people said that. Ross Perot in America, a billionaire, sort of a gadfly, said the same thing. And they blew that off. And if you go back so when I was writing Listen Liberal, I went back and looked it up. And the Clintons were predicting that manufacturing would grow in America. And it'd be more. It was the complete opposite happened. By the way, interesting fun fact. NAFTA is deeply unpopular in Mexico and Canada too. All three, the working class people of all three countries were ruined by this, not just the Americans. So in Mexico, it destroyed family farmers, destroyed them as a group, and they're because now they can import the American mega farm stuff from Kansas is coming down there and wiping them out, and they had been a protected group before NAFTA, and it's now they're wide open, boom, drop the bomb on them, and so they are the ones that are now flooding into these maquiladora regions, working in the factories. All of these poor people who had their way of life destroyed by NAFTA. So NAFTA is hated in Mexico. And in Canada, it brought down the government. Mulroney, the guy that signed it, he lost because of NAFTA. It was that's how hated it was. Now think about that. A trade agreement between all three countries, and all three countries are losers from it. How can that be?
Well, is it that they've just looked at it purely in a numerical way?
Well, because it's good for some. It's class. It's good for some people and bad for others.
Yeah.
The number of people that it's good for is very small, but it's people like the people I live around in Bethesda, Maryland. They're doing great. But Ohio is like your guy Goldsmith said. Look at it now. Now look what's happened. Yeah.
So overall, your country may be more wealthy, but if you've disrupted the lives of potentially millions of people.
Yeah, it's really, if you think about it in a balance of power way, the balance of power between labor and management, this totally tilted the scale in management's favor. That's the easiest way to put it. But it's not just NAFTA, it's the deal with China, all the different deals put together, and they're all done along the NAFTA model nowadays. So if you look at, American GDP is really high right now. The stock market is way up, but the way wealth is distributed in America is more unequal than ever before, since World War II. You go back to the 19th century, and it's very similar to what it is now. But their economists have a phrase, the labor share of gross domestic product, and then there's the owner share, which means capitalist share, the stock market, that sort of thing. And labor's share is lower than at any time since World War II, or it has been for the last 5 years or so. And the share of GDP going to people who own is higher than, it's just straight up distribution of wealth. And NAFTA has an important role in that because, as I said before, it provided management with the most incredible weapon that they can always threaten to leave. So they now have this weapon that the other side doesn't have, and they use it all the time. That is important. There's no Democrat that talks about NAFTA that will ever acknowledge that that's true. But everyone in organized labor knows it's true. You do any kind of research and you run into that immediately. But the liberals can't acknowledge that. They won't talk about it.
So with this book, it being self-critical and not being embraced by the mainstream media, has it been a hard road personally?
It was at first because you spend, when you write a book like this, it's a big investment of time. It took a year, and I don't have a regular job anymore, a regular journalist job. So this was a gamble, and it was at first it was very disheartening that nobody was interested in it. But come on, here we are in beautiful sunny Adelaide. I'm happy. I'm very happy.
Well, I figured that it's just going to sustain. We're talking about this book here. I told a friend in Melbourne you were coming, and she wants to marry you. Like,
I'm already taken.
Yeah.
But that's wonderful. And like I say, I write for the future. So, my friends and I, when we were starting out in the world of literature, we'd always talk about who we write for, and I always had trouble imagining the audience, but that's who it is. The audience is the future. So,
So you feel that you've done the right thing?
Oh, yeah. Oh, no, as an intellectual, yes. I mean, yeah. If I was a more partisan Democrat, I might feel bad about it, but I'm not. I mean, why would I be? That is not a serious intellectual position to be a partisan person. And I like to think, even though I'm not in academia anymore, that my life is about taking ideas and history seriously and not trying to come up with lies in order to get somebody elected or some bullshit like that. I don't give a shit about that. This is bigger.
As a final question, I just want to ask you, this is a filmmaking podcast, what is your favorite film and why?
It's called The Best Years of Our Lives, and it is the most beautiful evocation of what America used to be like in the 1940s. Yeah, I love that movie. You ever seen it? I don't know if it translates outside of America very well, but it's a great movie.
What is it conjuring? It's
about 3 servicemen coming home from World War II and the various things that happened to them. And it was a celebrated movie at the time, but it was really ahead of its time in all sorts of ways. But you got to see it. You'll see what I'm talking about. 1946, I think it came out.
It seems like something well before that period of sort of pessimism in cinema, American cinema.
Yeah, the movie has a happy ending because that was almost required by law in America. So they tack one on at the end. But as with all of these movies with happy endings, if you just delete that, it's a depressing film. But it does, like I say, the hero and his girl get married, and it has a happy ending. So.
Thank you so much for coming on the program. I wish you the best with your continued tour around the world, and I think there's a lot of life in this book left for you. So I think
thank you so much. That is very kind of you. I love your country, by the way.
Thank you. Thanks
All right, man.
Beautiful.